Hi everyone, welcome to Animation Juice. My name is Richard and it's Move It Monday, which means it's time for another animation tutorial in Flash. And in this week's tutorial I'm going to show you how to take what we did last week with the hand-drawn bouncing flower sack, and I'm going to show you how to translate that into a more standardized production workflow using Flash specific tools, specifically the animated tween and symbols. So this is a great tutorial to show you that you can still get the same great animation results using all of the fundamental principles that we've been using and learning in the previous episodes, and more standardized animation tools of Flash. So let's jump in. Hey guys, so here we are in Flash, and you can see that I've got the animation of the hand-drawn flowers that we did last week, and here it is with all of the frames that we did. There it is, and you can see that I've got this more rendered vector looking thing which I've drawn straight into Flash. Now this isn't a Flash drawing tutorial, but you can, just using the brush tool, press B for the brush tool, and you can just literally draw directly into the Flash environment and create your frames that way. But anyway, so all I've done here is I've just drawn directly into Flash, and you can see that we've got our hand-drawn thing timed out. And literally all of the hard work has been done. All I've done is I've posed out, I've matched frame for frame the more rendered version of the flower sack with our hand-drawn one that we did last week. So you can see here we go, as we're going through, I've just drawn the key frames of our animation. So we've got our standard frame, and it goes down into our beginning to go into our squash frame. So there's another keyframe. There's another key drawing. I mean, you wouldn't really call that a key drawing, but for our purposes, it's a drawing that is we need to be in place before we tween it. I'll get into that in a second, but you can see that all I've done is just matched our rendered flower sack with our hand-drawn rougher version that we did last week on the left. Up it goes, down there. So I've just drawn some key drawings to match our hand-drawn example that we did last week. Now, if I said that we're going to use symbols and tweens. Now the standard way to animate in Flash isn't really draw on the timeline. Now you can just draw straight on the timeline, just like we did last week with this guy. We just drew straight on the timeline, and that's really how Simon's cat is done. And there's a studio called Bird Box, and I'm sure that you'll see in their animation. I'll put a link in the description below. But they often do quite hand-drawn stuff in Flash. Now personally that's my preference, though when you're in a time-pressured production environment, the way that you work really is using symbols and tweens. Now there's some benefits to symbols and tweens. Using symbols means that you can put all of the drawings into symbols, then duplicate the symbols and give it to multiple animators so that you're all working on the same rig at the same time, and it ensures more consistent on-model characters. You can create walk cycles and run cycles and jump cycles, especially for games where you want to have running loops and jumping loops and swiping sword loops. You know, you can just duplicate all those each time that you need them. And often if you are working in games, you will need to work in symbols, because the way that the programmers, the developers, that's the way that they require you to work in order for them to manipulate the animation in code. So there are some speed reasons and practical reasons to use the Flash production workflow using symbols and animated tweens. And the way that I approach using them, you can still get great animation using the fundamentals, principles of animation, using this method. And the way that I approach doing this using symbols is to draw. First of all, I would draw this key drawing, and then go to, let's just do a quick one as an example. I would draw a shape. There's a rudimentary flower sac. Once I've drawn that in Flash, I would go to Modify, Convert to Symbol. I would make sure that it's a graphic symbol, and I would give it a name, Symbol 1 or flower sac, whatever. Click OK. And now that is a symbol, and that's exactly what I did with this guy here. If you click on this box, you can see this is just a drawn. This is just a drawn example, and this is a drawing that's inside a graphic symbol. You know that's in a graphic symbol because A, you get this blue bounding box in it, and B, in the properties panel in Flash, you can see that it says graphics at the top there, and you get a few more options. But if you double click on that, you will see that inside of this clip there are 4 keyframes, and on each of those keyframes is where I have the drawings for all of the sort of the key drawings in Flash. Now, these are just vector shapes, literally just drawn in Flash. You can see there's all the vector points there. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and they correspond to these drawings out here. Now you might say, well, hang on, you've got way more keyframes here than I have inside this clip. I only have 4 clips here, 4 frames in here. Well, that's because you really have to start, when you're animating Flash, trying using this method, you've got to try and simplify as much as possible. So you can see that this frame here is exactly the same as frame 1. Frame 3 is exactly the same as frame 1 in terms of the drawing. All I've done is I've squashed the frame slightly. I've transformed the flower sac down a little bit. It's exactly the same. Whereas in our hand-drawn example, that was actually redrawn a little bit. Then in the next frame, it switches to our second drawing. And the way to do that is if you select the graphic clip and type 2, make sure it's on single frame, but type 2. And what that means is it's going to display whatever's on frame 2 inside this graphics clip. So as you can see, frame 1 has this drawing and frame 2 has this drawing. So when you typed in 2, it's going to display that drawing. And all this frame is, it's frame 2. You can see in the properties panel when you click on that graphics clip, it's 2. But it's just a more squashed version of 2. You can see if we go to the transform panel that the height value is much smaller than the width value. So it's just literally been squashed and stretched. But as opposed to drawing that squash and stretch bespokely for each frame, we are just doing that drawing once and then trying to work with that drawing as much as possible using the squash and stretch deformers of Flash, which we've used them in previous tutorials, but as a quick reminder, just grab the symbol and hit Q and you get your bounding box, and you can just drag it. Pretty standard tool in any design program. So we're trying to work with as fewer drawings as possible. Now you see this one here, you'd think that one was maybe a hand-drawn drawing. Well, it's not. It's actually just it's actually frame 1. If you go to properties, it's actually frame 1 that has been severely stretched. You can see the transform value, if you go, it's been stretched. 150% in the y axis, in the y direction, but it is exactly the same as this frame here. If we were to copy that, let's just put it here, you can see it literally is just this drawing, this symbol stretched there. But it is just frame 1 of that symbol. So, and this drawing here, now this is another bespoke. This is actually frame 3 of our graphics clip. See here, that's just vector drawing shape. If you go to the properties panel, you can see that the frame is set to number 3. So of course, like I said, it's going to show the drawing that's on frame 3 of that symbol within that symbol clip. And again, this drawing is just a slightly squashed version of this drawing here. And again, this is frame 4 of our graphics clip. If you double click it and go inside it, there's the drawing on frame 4. When you type 4 in here, you'll see it'll go to here. Like for example, if you type 1, there you go, it's showing that 2, 3, 4. That's just how it works. And then this one is frame 2, that is again severely stretched, 114%. And again, that is still frame 2. Now it's squashed to 80% in the Y. That drawing 114. That is squashed 80%. It's like I say, it is exact. I know I keep repeating myself, but this is the crux of the whole animating in this way in Flash. You must have. You must try and work with as fewer drawings as possible and try and get as much out of those drawings as you can. Just by squashing and stretching, rotating or skewing the graphics clip. And then that's back to frame 1 again. And it just settles. And these are these are just slightly squashed and stretched versions of the symbol. The drawing inside is the same drawing. So that is. This entire animation is made up of literally 4 bespoke poses, as opposed to what we did last week, where we have 40 unique drawings. All we have now are 4 unique drawings. I mean, we've reduced it by a factor of 10. I think that's what a factor means. We had 40 drawings, now we have 40 unique drawings, now we have 4 unique drawings. So you can see how it is faster to animate this way, and why it's used in a production environment. And these the little nubbins on the corners again are graphics symbols again, but they just have one drawing and there's no variations on that. They're just the same nubbin, and all I've done there to get the motion that's happening in our hand-drawn example is just to rotate the clips and stretch them slightly. You can see that this drawing here is severely stretched, 153%, but it is literally just the same drawing that's been skewed, stretched and squashed using the deform tool in Flash. Now, why have we put these things into symbols? Well, apart from the fact that we are now only using 4 drawings and squashing and stretching them, as opposed to you drawing 40 unique drawings, we need them to be in symbols in order to apply the classic tween, which is the when you apply a classic tween to symbols, Flash adds in programmatical in-betweens. So you have to use the animation principles, the knowledge of the basic animation principles, to really dictate to Flash the key drawings, because it has no knowledge of animation. it's just going to give you standard in-between drawings. So you need to stop things looking floaty, like we did with the bouncing ball a few weeks ago. To stop things looking floaty, you've got to be really specific. So that's why there's quite a lot of keyframes here so far. But we're in a really great position because we actually have got this entire roughed out animation. It's unlikely, it's very rare that you would get the opportunity in a production environment to work out the entire animation in rough, through a detail as we have done. You would only really get a chance to thumbnail it. You would use those thumbnails to decide on what key drawings you need to draw. So what I'm going to do in this tutorial, to try and keep it much shorter than last week, is I've talked now through graphic symbols and the fact that now we only have 4 unique drawings for this entire animation as opposed to 40 unique drawings. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the classic animated tween to those symbols, so that Flash gives us some freebie in-betweens, and then I'm going to refine the overlapping action like we did last week, because as you'll see in a minute, it is going to spaz out a little bit when we do that. But we are at the point now where we're ready to add the classic in-between, so let's go ahead and do that. And to do that, I'm going to select this our entire timeline of our. And now, I should say that before we do this, you do need to make sure that everything has a separate layer. So we've got our body, and we have our 4 little nubbins, and each one is on a separate layer. So we've got our left arm, left leg, right leg, and body, all on a separate layer. And also, when the jump happens and there's some foreshortening happening on the jump, I put his right leg in front of his body. Now to do that, I've had to make a new layer above the body and remove the symbol from its original layer and just move them to the layer above. That's all I had to do. So when you've done that, given everything a separate layer, I want you to drag the entire timeline, select the entire timeline, right click it and go to create classic tween. You'll see you'll get all these purple arrows happening. And now we have got some free in-betweens, but it's not perfect and it will need some tidying up. But it has helped us a little bit. So we're gonna speed through this now a little bit. We've covered the 2 fundamentals of production flow animation in Flash, and that is the symbol, the fact that we've drawn key drawings within a symbol, and we're referencing those drawings on our main timeline using this number in the properties panel. So you click on the graphics clip and you select 1, 2, 3 or 4 depending on which 1, 2, 3, 4 drawing that you want. And by using the deform tool, we're trying to eke out as many unique positions for that drawing as possible. And then once we have posed this guy out using that method, then we select the entire timeline and right click and create classic tween, and that's going to add in free in-betweens. But you must use your knowledge of animation principles to dictate as much as possible the motion curves and the motion, what is happening in the animation, so that Flash doesn't. You stand in a much stronger position. It's going to be a much less time to clean this animation up and refine it and add in the overlapping action than you would otherwise if you didn't dictate accurately the key drawings and what is tweening, what's tweening between what, you know. So I'm gonna go ahead now and just clean this thing up. Really, mainly just adding easing to the drawings and sorting out his arms and legs and adding the overlapping action exactly like we did in the previous version. And this is where we're going to start to add more keyframes. I'll talk you through it as I'm going along, but I'm going to speed this up now, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we looked at the easing now, and it's feeling instantly a lot better. And not all, like I say, all the easing has done is it's addressed the principle of spacing. So we're slowing in, to, and out of poses in accordance to what we worked out last week. Again, this is just using 4 drawings, 4 unique drawings. 1, 2, 3, 4. All of which we're just using variations of different X and Y value, X and width and heights, and skews and rotations to make a smooth animation. It really is, doesn't really matter. The most important thing is to get the flow of shape, visual shape happening, which is why, even though the one that we did last week is quite scrappy in terms of line, this week's one is much neater, last week's one is much more scrappy in terms of line, it doesn't really matter. It's more about, the most important thing is just getting that, the shapes, the masses moving smoothly, the visual masses moving smoothly, and in accordance with the animation principles. Okay, so now we've looked at the easing, and now I'm just going to go. Really, the only thing that's left to do is to address the overlapping action of the little arms and the legs, and this is the exact same process that we did last week. It's just that we're not drawing every single frame. We are doing passes. We've focused so far on the main body mass, and now we're going to add the overlapping action, which is the action that follows the main action. It's sort of the coattails on a body, or a tail on a horse. You know, in this case, the little nubbins. So I'm just going to go through now and fix the overlapping action, one arm and leg at a time, and this one should be done. So let's go ahead and do that. Don't be afraid to add in all of these keyframes, especially for overlapping action. it makes it in the previous. You see, I'm doing his right arm. Oh, all right, his left. Last week, it was so easy to just draw the nice curvature of the arm. You can do that in Flash, but with this symbol method. But you do, just like we have done with the body. We've got 4 unique frames. You would need to go in and manually add that sort of curvature of the arm. Well, often in production environment you don't get time for that, but that doesn't mean that you can't get nice overlapping action. It just means that you need to reduce what could be quite stiff symbols moving around all over the place. You just need to add a few more keyframes to get it to follow nice paths of action, and that's really going to improve make everything much smoother, even though the drawings themselves are quite stiff. The individual drawings are quite stiff, but animating it along smooth arcs, the principle of arcs, goes a long way to addressing and resolving that problem, so you don't get stiff, jerky animation. So here is the finished jump. I've done all the overlapping action for the arms and the legs, and that bit takes a little while, because you find that you'll be adding to get nice overlapping action. You will be adding more keyframes, especially when you're just using static images and trying to make them feel very flowy. You'll notice in the hand-drawn version, watch the arms, you'll see how they do reverse curves. Let me just get a pen. You'll see, like for instance, there you've got that sort of curve, and then the frame after you've got that kind of curve. So you see that. So the hand-drawn one, you can get much more fluid drawings, but that doesn't preclude getting fluid animation if you're using static graphics clips in Flash. Look at these, like I said, these little arms and legs in the Flash version. They're just one image, just they could be very rigid up and down image. There's no lovely reverse curves happening. You could put that in the graphics clips, but often in production environments you don't have time. You've got to work with as fewer drawings and as simpler drawings as possible, but you can still get nice fluid flowing animation just by following the basic animation principles of especially arcs. Just making sure that the static images are flowing along nice arcs. If we just step through the animation itself, I'm looking at the arms and the legs. Just everything is flowing along nice, invisible arcs, and you know they are because it feels smooth. That's quite an obvious. If something feels a bit jerky and a bit jumpy, it's probably because your limbs aren't following a smooth path of motion. So let's watch these. So there's our hand-drawn version and there's our Flash version. Let's turn off our hand-drawn version for now and just look at the hand-drawn version, and you'll see, so that is using graphics clips and animated tweens, classic tweens in Flash. And there are, like with the hand-drawn version, there are 40 different drawings. But with this version, the Flash graphics clip, using tweens to animate it, if we double click inside the clip, you'll see it's only using 4 different drawings. Boom, 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 boom. 4 different drawings to get all of these variations. All it's doing, we're just scaling it, squashing it and stretching it, maybe slightly skewing the symbol, and maybe a little bit of rotation as well, just to get as much variation and as much fluidity within those static simple shapes as possible. And you can see that you can get, it really is about, if you just follow arcs, get nice overlapping action, use squash and stretch in a way conducive to convey weight and gravity. You know, all of the basic stuff that we've been going over with the bouncing ball, it's exactly the same. Just because we're using a slightly finicky way of working and idiosyncrasies of the Flash tool, doesn't mean that you can't get nice animation. So we're using 4 drawings plus very static, rigid arms and legs, and you can see that we can get a very nice, fluid, spongy, squashy, stretchy, weighty, very appealing animation. So that is how you use a graphics clip and classic tweens to create a bouncing flower sack. So that's it for this episode. I hope you really enjoyed it, and I hope it's really shown you that you can still get great animation results even using more idiosyncratic and digital specific tools, in this case Flash's animated tween and graphic symbol clips. If you like this tutorial, make sure to let me know by leaving a like and a comment, and I'm really interested to hear how you think the length of the tutorials are. I know last week's tutorial was over an hour long, even sped up in places, and I've tried to shorten this one down, but let me know how it's worked for you and which is most useful. Whether you enjoy watching the sped up version, the speed animation, or whether you prefer me to skip some of the steps and just explain what I've done when I've done it. So let me know in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure to subscribe below to stay up to date with all the latest tutorials as they come out. And until next week's Movement Monday, have a great week guys, and I'll see you later.